A wife announced she was taking a 6-month break from their marriage to find herself. Her husband knew she was cheating, knew exactly where she'd be and with whom. What he did during those 6 months shocked everyone and taught her a lesson she'd never forget. The afternoon. Sun cast long shadows across the living room where two people who'd promised forever now sat on opposite ends of the same couch, the space between them feeling wider than any physical distance could measure. Amanda Richardson twisted her wedding ring nervously, the diamond catching light, while she rehearsed words she'd practiced in her head for weeks, but still sounded hollow when spoken aloud. Her husband Marcus sat quietly, his face unreadable, waiting for her to explain why she'd asked for this conversation with such serious urgency. The house they'd bought together 5 years ago suddenly felt like a stage set for a performance. Neither had rehearsed properly, and what Amanda was about to say would either destroy their marriage or force them both to confront truths they'd been avoiding for longer than either wanted to. Admit that before this story takes you into what happened in that living room. Pause for just a moment. If you believe in growth that comes from letting go, in responses that surprise with grace instead of rage, and in the way sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone better, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that dignity beats drama, and subscribe to Untold Kindness Journey. Your support helps us tell stories that prove strength isn't about fighting dirty. It's about rising above while others sink, and sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is indifference backed by action. Amanda's words came out in a practiced rush, like she was afraid she'd lose courage if she slowed down. Marcus, I need to be honest with you. I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a while. I feel like I've lost myself in this marriage, in being a wife, in all the routines and expectations. I need time to find myself again, to figure out who I am outside of us. I'm asking for a 6-month break. Not a divorce, just space. Time to explore what I want, who I want to be. She didn't mention the co-worker she'd been texting constantly, didn't acknowledge the late work meetings that were clearly something else, didn't say what Marcus already knew, that finding herself was code for finding herself in someone else's bed while keeping her husband as a backup plan. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his expression still calm, almost serene, in a way that made Amanda nervous because she'd expected anger or tears or desperate pleas to stay. Instead, his voice came out measured and steady. 6 months. To find yourself. And you want to stay married during this time? Amanda nodded eagerly, relief flooding through her that he wasn't fighting this, wasn't making it ugly. Yes, I just need space. We can still be married, just living separately. Taking a break. Marcus nodded slowly, and what he said next surprised her. Okay, take your 6 months. Find yourself. I won't contact you during this time unless it's an emergency. You have complete freedom to do whatever you need to do. Amanda felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment, some part of her having wanted him to fight harder, to prove she mattered enough to battle for. But Marcus's calm acceptance made everything easier, made her feel less guilty about the apartment she'd already rented, closer to her co-worker's place. The plans she'd already made that this break was supposed to legitimize. She moved out that weekend, taking clothes and personal items but leaving most furniture, telling herself this was temporary, that she'd be back when she was ready, that Marcus would wait for her like a good safety net, while she explored excitement she felt entitled to, after 5 years of marriage, that had become comfortable rather than passionate. What Amanda didn't know, what she couldn't have known because Marcus revealed nothing of his plans, was that her break announcement had been the catalyst he needed to finally address issues he'd been avoiding. He'd known about the affair for weeks, had seen the texts she'd carelessly left visible, had felt her emotional distance growing, but had convinced himself that ignoring problems would somehow solve them. Her request for a break had been insulting in its transparency, treating him like a fool who couldn't see through the obvious, expecting him to wait patiently while she betrayed their vows under the thin cover of self-discovery. But instead of rage or revenge, Marcus felt something unexpected: relief. The first thing Marcus did was call a lawyer, not to file for divorce immediately, but to understand his options, to prepare for what he suspected would be inevitable once Amanda's affair ran its predictable course. The second thing he did was finally acknowledge that he'd stopped growing years ago, had become complacent in their marriage, had let himself become someone less interesting than the man Amanda had originally married. Her betrayal stung, but her reasons for leaving, even if delivered dishonestly, held uncomfortable truth. He had stopped trying, had settled into routines, had taken their marriage for granted, while expecting it to sustain itself on autopilot. Marcus threw himself into transformation with intensity that surprised even him. He hired a personal trainer and started working out daily, losing the 20 pounds that had crept on during years of comfortable marriage. He enrolled in the MBA program he'd been putting off, finally pursuing the graduate degree that could advance his career. He reconnected with friends he'd neglected, started playing guitar again after years of his instrument gathering dust, joined a hiking group that took weekend trips to mountains he'd only ever talked about climbing someday. He remodeled the house, tearing out dated fixtures and installing updates they'd discussed but never implemented, transforming their shared space into something that reflected his taste rather than compromise. He didn't post about any of this on social media, didn't try to make Amanda jealous or prove anything to mutual friends who'd started choosing sides. He simply focused on becoming a better version of himself, on building a life that would be fulfilling whether she came back or not, on proving to himself that he was more than just someone's husband, more than a placeholder, waiting for someone else to decide his worth. The 6 months passed with Marcus barely noticing time, too busy with classes and workouts and weekend hikes and friendships that had deepened without the distraction of a failing marriage he'd been trying desperately to ignore. Meanwhile, Amanda's self-discovery took the predictable path that affairs disguised as soul-searching usually do. The excitement of sneaking around evaporated once the relationship was no longer forbidden. Her co-worker turned out to be charming in stolen moments, but exhausting in sustained exposure, his confidence revealing itself as narcissism, his spontaneity as irresponsibility. The apartment she'd rented felt lonely rather than liberating, her freedom hollow when she realized she'd traded stability for excitement that lasted approximately 6 weeks before becoming boring. She started missing Marcus, or more accurately, missing the life they'd built together, the security she'd taken for granted, the partnership she'd convinced herself was boring, but now recognized as valuable. 5 months into the break, Amanda showed up at the house unannounced, using her key like she still lived there, expecting to find Marcus waiting, probably depressed, definitely ready to welcome her back. What she found instead stopped her in the doorway like she'd walked into the wrong house. The place was transformed, modern and clean and masculine, in ways that erased her presence completely. Marcus walked out of the kitchen wearing clothes that fit a body she barely recognized, confident and healthy, and completely unbothered by her surprise appearance. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" His tone was polite but distant, like she was an acquaintance rather than his wife. Amanda's carefully prepared speech about having found herself and being ready to work on their marriage died in her throat as she looked at the stranger her husband had become. The living room where they'd had that conversation 5 months ago was completely different. New furniture and paint and artwork that she didn't recognize. "I wanted to talk," she managed finally. "About us, about coming home." Marcus poured himself coffee, didn't offer her any, leaned against the counter with casual ease. "Home. That's interesting. You've been finding yourself for 5 months. How's that working out?" His question wasn't cruel, just honest, and somehow that was worse than anger. Amanda felt panic rising in her chest as she realized Marcus wasn't playing the role she'd scripted for him. "I made a mistake. I see that now. I want to come back, to work on us, to be together again." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression compassionate but firm. "Amanda, I'm going to be honest with you. I knew about the affair. I knew that finding yourself was code for exploring a relationship with your co-worker. I gave you the space you asked for, not because I'm a fool, but because I needed it too. These 5 months taught me something important. I can't control what you do, but I can control who I become. And who I've become is someone who deserves a partner, who chooses me first, not someone who keeps me as backup while testing other options." Amanda's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's over with him." "It didn't mean anything. Please, Marcus, I love you. I made a mistake. Can't we try again?" Marcus's voice stayed gentle but resolute. "I don't hate you, Amanda. I'm not even angry anymore. But I'm not interested in being your safety net or your second choice. You wanted space to find yourself. I used that same space to find myself too, and what I found is that I'm better alone than with someone who treats our marriage like a subscription service they can pause and resume at will. The divorce papers are already drawn up. My lawyer will send them next week. You can keep your name on the house if you want, but I'm buying you out. This chapter is closed. The divorce was finalized 2 months later, amicable in the way endings are when one person has moved on completely while the other is still processing. Amanda tried several times to change his mind, sending long texts about mistakes and lessons learned and promises to be better, but Marcus never wavered. He didn't respond with anger or lengthy explanations, just maintained boundaries with quiet firmness, proving that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge, but indifference backed by growth. He didn't need to make her suffer, because her own choices had already taught whatever lessons she was going to learn. Marcus never did post his transformation on social media, never publicly shamed Amanda or sought sympathy from mutual friends, never turned their divorce into entertainment for others. He simply moved forward into a life he'd built during those 6 months, a life that didn't require her presence to feel complete. When friends asked how he'd handled it so gracefully, he told them the truth. Amanda asking for a break had been the gift he didn't know he needed, permission to stop trying to save something that was already gone, freedom to become someone better instead of someone bitter. Her betrayal had hurt, but his response to it had healed him in ways staying and fighting never would have.